Today we're talking about one of the most famous artworks of all time, one of the oldest artworks of all time, the Great Hall of the Bulls in Lascaux, France. And Ms. Madre is really, really excited to talk about this one, so I'll let her take it from here.
These caves are known for some of the earliest paintings in the world. They date all the way back to about 15,000 BCE, and they think that these were made by just multiple artists over a course of maybe even 2,000 years. Just all kinds of different animals, everything from bulls, like the hall is named after, horses, bison, even some felines, so a lot of different animals. Right. So there's some, like one of a wounded man, I think maybe there was a hunting accident.
So I'd love to elaborate a little on the hunting man, because this is my favorite part of Lascaux, because it just seems to tell a story, whereas some of the other images, it's sort of like animals just living their best life, right? They're just hanging out. But then this one, it just seems like something really terrible happened. And I love a good, like, spooky story. And so to me, I like to just imagine what could have possibly happened here. The figure in the middle doesn't look to be okay.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and now that we really look at it, the bull on the right doesn't seem to be okay either.
No.
So, there's something that happened here. Obviously, we don't know for sure because there was no written language or anything like that back then.
Yes, we're talking about a time that predates written history. So that's why these paintings are so important. We're able to gather knowledge about what life might have been like during this time period. And we're not, real sure their reasoning behind some of these paintings. We definitely think it wasn't for just practicing their art skills. We think it mostly was a documentation process. So documenting hunting, things that were going on in the area. We know that there were bones and fossils found in the area of these animals. So they were observing out in the real world and then coming back in and painting in the caves.
Yeah, and it seems like there was something really significant about this cave in particular, with there being so many illustrations from, so many different people throughout the course of ancient history. And then thinking, too, about how difficult it would have been to make these.
Right.
Like, they didn't have paint. They didn't have crayons and colored pencils. None of that existed.
The walls have projections on them. It's not a flat surface. The cave walls are curved. It's dark. It's damp. So this wouldn't have been something where they went in for something to do, a hobby, to go paint. This would have been an important way to document things that were going on. And you can see the different layers. A bull, a large bull with a smaller horse on top. So for centuries and for generations, the people are going back to the same cave and painting on top of their ancestors' paintings.
I know sometimes we think of cave art as being made by cave people who lived in the cave, but the evidence doesn't really support the theory that they were living there. Certainly to seek shelter temporarily, but they didn't have farming. They didn't have any sort of permanent residence. So they really did have to kind of go from place to place.
Right. They were hunters and gatherers.
Exactly. So, for there to be something like this that has obviously had a lot of care and thought put into this, it's really a labor of love. It just shows that this was really important to them. So, and there's even some handprints here and there throughout the cave. So it's sort of the artist's signature, which, when you sign your artwork, you're sort of leaving your mark, right? And it just shows that you were there.
What's even more unbelievable about these paintings is they weren't discovered until the 1900s. A couple of boys actually lost like a soccer ball or something down a hole, or their dog or something. So, these were opened up for some time, and you could actually go inside and you could visit the caves. And then eventually, deterioration started happening.
Because people are breathing on it. And
yes, lots of hot air. And so they did have to shut the caves down at some point and open up. They created, of course, replicas that now you can visit in the same area.
And it's very, very creatively named. the place you can go visit that is a full replica of Lascaux is called Lascaux 2. That's really what it's called.
Right. So the original site is monitored daily for humidity and temperature controls and things like that, so that they can preserve it, so that nobody can see it because you can't go there.
Right. This is sort of like the example, right, of Paleolithic art. It's so expansive, and there's so many animals. Not even the oldest example of animals painted by ancient humans. In Africa, there are some really beautiful illustrations of animals, and one in particular that's called the Apollo 11 stones, named that way because it was discovered around the same time as the Apollo 11 launch. Also depicts some really beautiful animal drawings on stones. In a similar style, even though the caves at Lascaux are in France, Apollo 11 stones were in Namibia, but they look very similar. So it just goes to show how universal art can be, that all over the world, people are making similar looking stuff. They had no way of knowing what someone halfway across the world was doing, and it just happened that they looked very, very similar.
So you're talking a little bit about the artistic style, and you guys can see with these animals, usually very simplistic outlines, usually side views, but sometimes the bodies may be twisted a little bit, but mostly very flat. Any big, broad areas of color that you might see. Well, let's talk about what they used to make these paintings.
Yeah, because it's kind of incredible
Yes.
that what they did with what they had.
So they didn't run out to Michael's or order anything on Amazon, obviously. All the pigments at this time would have been made from, things they could find. So dirt, and then they would bind it with animal fat to help it be the consistency they needed. And once again,
similar to how maybe paint is now, it has binders and things in addition to the pigments that would make it something that you can apply to a surface. So they had to kind of make it themselves.
So, and then they would use anything from the animal hair, once again, going back to the animal fat, animal hair to make brushes. Maybe they use moss, and then they think maybe even they hollowed out bones and kind of blue pigment through the bones like a spray paint for some of these big, broad areas of color.
The things that they had to use in order to support them being able to make this, so things like lamps, they didn't have a normal lamp. They would have a chunk of animal fat on a rock that they'd light on fire, which is obviously not the most convenient thing to try to handle, but that's all they had. Is pretty remarkable. They did, what they were able to do.